Oppenheimer and The Social Network are both helmed by all-time great directors putting their visual mastery to work on two of the most important true stories of their respective generations, situated within two wholly different fields of expertise. For J. Robert Oppenheimer, it is the creation of the atomic bomb, and for Mark Zuckerberg, it is the social media platform Facebook. But the key to their critical and financial successes lies within their focus on the personal human aspects of the narratives, specifically with how they are centered around two troubled geniuses grappling with ethical dilemmas stemming from their actions and the consequences of their creations. Neither man is a traditional hero. Oppenheimer and Zuckerberg are both flawed, broken in certain ways, and their struggles lead to incredibly complex characterizations, where they experience cognitive dissonance due to the conflicts between their intellectual prowess and their personal problems. But how does this manifest within our two protagonists, and what are the similarities and differences in both texts? Why don't we start by taking a closer look at Oppenheimer and The Social Network. Framing devices. Both films feature framing devices, which is to say their narratives are framed within a secondary story, creating a story within a story. In these cases, both films feature two framing devices, creating an embedded narrative. This allows multiple perspectives of specific events to be seen, introducing conflict and creating tension. In The Social Network, it is the depositions and legal proceedings involving Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. First involves Eduardo Saverin, who claims his shares of Facebook were unfairly diluted when the company was incorporated.
Mark!
And the second features the Winklevoss twins, who claim Zuckerberg stole their idea when creating Facebook. By using the depositions as a framing device, different characters' testimonies provide varying accounts of what transpired.
I'm not embarrassed, you just made a lot of that up.
She was under oath.
Then I guess that would be the first time somebody's lied under oath.
Zuckerberg must endure testimony after testimony where he is completely embarrassed, and despite having crafted a social networking platform where millions of friends can connect with each other, he perhaps might begin to realise that he has no true friends left himself. In Oppenheimer, we cut back and forth between Oppenheimer's 1954 security clearance hearing and Strauss's 1959 Senate confirmation hearing. It should be noted that Strauss's sequence is also filmed entirely in black and white, not just to denote the passing of time, but to highlight how we are viewing this sequence not through Oppenheimer's point of view, but that it is rather Louis Strauss's account of how the story played out. And unlike Oppenheimer, Strauss's viewpoint is much simpler. He sees the world as black and white, not in grey like Oppenheimer does. Here the hearings highlight how Oppenheimer became an advocate for international control of nuclear weapons. They force him out of his comfort zone, where he must confront his choices in an environment that he would otherwise never dream of doing so in. His personal affairs are aired out, and the devastating consequences of crafting the atomic bomb all help in amplifying his cognitive dissonance as he grapples with the moral and ethical implications of it. In both The Social Network and Oppenheimer, the framing devices are utilised in a way so that both Zuckerberg and Oppenheimer must confront their internal conflicts, but also to highlight how not everything we see is always going to be true, that certain accounts might be influenced by personal vendettas and out of anger. Which leads us into personal relationships and betrayals. In The Social Network, the friendship between Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin deteriorates due to business decisions and betrayals. Mark betrays Eduardo, believing he had to for the betterment of his company, that Eduardo was a liability.
I was your only friend. Yet one friend.
It is an example of his cognitive dissonance, justifying his negative decision in cutting his best friend out of his company.
You set me up. You're gonna blame me because you were the business head of the company and you made a bad business deal with your own company?
It's gonna be like I'm not a part of Facebook.
In Oppenheimer, the relationships among scientists become strained as political and ideological differences come to light. Strauss as a character seems rather like an amalgamation of both Eduardo and Sean Parker. While he and Oppenheimer were never close friends like Mark and Eduardo, they were both colleagues who supposedly held a certain amount of respect for each other. At least Strauss did at one time for Oppenheimer. And then, like Sean Parker, he seems at times to suffer from paranoia. Sean warns Mark throughout that he might go through the same experiences he already has.
I
can't prove it, but I know they tap my phones. Whatever it is that's gonna trip you up, you've done already.
While Strauss continues to pinpoint a conversation between Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein as being when the others soured on him.
I told you about that. Einstein by the pond.
You did, but sir, since nobody really knows what they said to each other that day, is it possible they didn't talk about you at all?
Thus, both betrayals seem to stem from almost boorish reasons. Although never outright stated by Mark, it is hinted at that the true reason Mark betrayed his once best friend was because he got into finals club when Mark never did. And Strauss's decision to turn his back on Oppenheimer seems to have stemmed from a public hearing where Oppenheimer disproved his theory and made him seem foolish. Yet these minor conflicts and disagreements lead to situations with massive consequences. Oppenheimer is rather on the receiving end of the betrayal. He is the one who has been ignored after creating the atomic bomb. He believed that the decision to create this weapon of mass destruction was the correct one in order to do so before the Germans, which if failed would have led to even worse circumstances. Yet once his job is complete, he realizes that his creation has led to the deaths of thousands of innocent lives that he was incapable of stopping. Once he stops justifying the creation of the weapon, he becomes aware of the mental and emotional discomfort that his cognitive dissonance has caused. But rather than trying to reduce his dissonance, Oppenheimer takes on the hearing previously discussed, where all of his flaws and sins are brought up and exploited. Rather than trying to reduce his dissonance, he wants to be punished for all that he has done. Mark never tries to reduce his dissonance. He instead plays up the arsehole version of himself, mirroring Erica's perception of him and his own current view. Which takes us into romances. Both Oppenheimer and Zuckerberg go through complicated relationships during the runtime of their respective films. For Oppenheimer, the most impactful relationship he has is with Jean Tatlock. For Zuckerberg, it's Erica Albright, a fictional creation by writer Aaron Sorkin. Both women's screen times are limited, with Erica appearing in approximately 6 minutes and 45 seconds of the 120-minute running time, while Jean appears for only 6 minutes and 25 seconds of the 180-minute running time. During their limited screen time, they both have a profound impact and influence on the careers and emotions of our protagonists. Let's take a closer look. Erica breaking up with Mark in the bar kickstarts his idea of creating Facebook by first creating Face Smash, a website where young men can rate the looks of the women on campus at their university. Now here are where the differences appear. For Mark, the end of his relationship with Erica fuels the fire which leads to him creating Facebook. And then at the midpoint, where he once again approaches Erica at a bar, their conversation goes awry, leading to Mark wanting the website to have a larger outreach.
We have to expand.
What, Mark?
Yet for Oppenheimer, the end of his relationship with Jean is what begins his feelings of guilt, making him second guess his decisions as to whether or not he is doing the right thing. He feels as if he is the reason she supposedly committed suicide, that he was the one that put his hand on the back of her head and drowned her. But unlike Mark, Oppenheimer has the support of a secondary love interest in Kitty. She is able to recognize Oppenheimer's flaws and accepts them to the best of her ability, just as Oppenheimer does for her. She stands up for him even when he won't for himself, and helps in trying to change his behaviours in order to reduce his cognitive dissonance and bring his worldview back into alignment. Open endings and conclusions. Now, how do Oppenheimer and Zuckerberg's personal stories conclude? Both are, to some extent, open-ended. Oppenheimer suggests remorse for the part he played in the creation of the atomic bomb, believing that the fallout of it could lead to the end of the world.
I believe we did.
And I've always interpreted the ending of The Social Network to suggest that Mark perhaps shows signs of remorse for the way he treated Erica. Cognitive dissonance remorse arises between Oppenheimer and Zuckerberg's actions and the value of personal connections. Oppenheimer's emotional reaction following the news of Jean's suicide, the part he played in it and the ultimate bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and Mark's remorse emerges as he reflects on the impact of his behaviour and how he now sits alone at the top of a company, without his best friend, and having ruined his relationship with Erica. Overall, Oppenheimer and The Social Network are both less concerned with what their protagonists build, and rather place the focus on how their complex emotions are affected because of their creations, and I believe that both films truly are better off because of it.